Welcome everyone. Please continue to mix and mingle. I am so excited tonight to welcome you. This is the fourth event, the final one in our series of artists. And tonight we are joined by the absolutely incredible Emma Fick. Yes, please. I love Emma's work because it bridges the past and the present, and it links the traditional and the innovative in ways that resonate deeply with the vision and value of Tulane University Libraries. At Tulane University Libraries, our kaleidoscopic vision celebrates transformation and connection. Like a kaleidoscope, Emma's art invites us to look at familiar pieces of our world, symbols, stories, spaces, and see them anew, reimagined in unexpected and beautiful ways. Her exploration of hybrids, for instance, melding Louisiana's cultural identity with ancient traditions, nature's forms with mythological imagination, parallels our own commitment to blending knowledge, community, and creativity into something uniquely impactful to our university and its setting. Public art, like public spaces and public knowledge, is essential to this vision. It inspires curiosity, ignites dialogue, and transforms shared spaces into meaningful encounters. Emma's work for the library, particularly her stained glass triptych, From Within, and the Mobile in Search of Language, I've got two of them here poised on my ears, redefines how we engage with our environment. And by using modern materials like plastic and LED lights to reinterpret a centuries-old medium, Emma challenges us to think about the intersection of tradition and innovation, much like libraries themselves do in this digital age. We are thrilled to have Emma here to share stories, processes, and symbolism behind these stunning works that are now alive in our library spaces. Her work is not only visually striking, but also an invitation to explore how art, like libraries, helps us to hybridize ideas and build from what we know in ways that help us imagine possibilities for the future. One more observation I had, just because it struck me this morning. Part of what I love so much about Emma's work that I think is particularly special and is particularly relevant to why I like having her in the library is she believes firmly in egalitarian access to her artwork, right? The mobiles I'm wearing on my ears, is it a mobile on my ear or is it a giant earring on your ceiling, right? She's willing to do both, and she does both with an extraordinary amount of skill, creativity, and grace. Please join me in welcoming the absolutely incredible Emma Fick.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Thank you, Lindsay, for that beautiful introduction. Like Lindsay said, my name is Emma Fick. I'm gonna structure this in two sections. I'm gonna start with the kind of cerebral first. I'm gonna talk about the concept behind the work and how I came to think about it, and then I'm gonna move into the concrete. And so the slideshow that I'll begin is gonna show you the actual fabrication of these pieces and give you kind of the nitty-gritty of how they were actually made. So I was born and raised in Covington, Louisiana, right across Lake Pontchartrain. I did not study art. I studied literature and came into art later. Being self-taught is a big part of my artistic identity now, and it shapes how I approach almost everything that I do. I want to share a few pillars of my practice that I think are particularly relevant to this project. An interest in pattern, an interest in everyday beauty, which is related to pattern when you think of wallpapers, rugs, that sort of thing. Accessibility of art, as Lindsay mentioned, and in the link between word and image, which came partly from the fact that I studied literature, and I've always been drawn to pieces that tell a story. So to that end, I've long been interested in religious art, because religious art has a very specific narrative to tell, and can be read much like a text. Stained glass windows in churches were called the Bible for the poor because people who were illiterate could read the images. I also do quite a bit of just kind of self-taught religious art comparative study when I'm traveling. I'm always looking at different holy spaces across religions, in Catholicism, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, all of it, and I just see what links all of those spaces. And one of the things that links them all is elevation. We elevate things that we think should be separated from the everyday. We encircle them, if you think about halos in Christianity, or niches in a lot of Buddhist art, or archways in mosques. the ark holds the Torah in Judaism. All of these things are a way of encircling something to show that it's holy. Bathing in light, whether it's natural light or synthetic light, shining a light on something, gilding. I'm always just looking at these through lines, these like visual languages that say, this is different from the everyday. These signifiers of holiness really cross geographies, they cross timelines. I mean, from the ancient to the modern, civilizations that didn't have any contact with each other independently use the same symbols. And I think that speaks to some kind of primordial thing within us as humans, that we all understand certain things to uplift and make holy. So it didn't take long for me to decide that I wanted to use some of these holy signifiers for the library, because it is such a holy space of learning. It is somewhere where students and other people come to separate the everyday from this special kind of sanctified place to study and delve in. I came to this space, and one of the first things that I noticed is that it was quite looming, I would say. It was dark. It had a lot of grays, and compared to a lot of the architecture that is traditional to Louisiana and to New Orleans, there aren't these high ceilings and lots of natural light coming in. And I kind of wanted to make it feel more like the other buildings in Louisiana as well by bringing in more light in the form of the stained glass windows. So I do want to note how Lindsay and I met. She spoke on this a little bit in her intro. I mean, it's all going to tie in. We didn't plan that it's going to tie in beautifully, but Lindsay actually came to one of my earring making classes after hearing about me from Daniela, a local photojournalist. And Lindsay didn't tell me who she was when she came. She just came and made earrings. And the reason that feels really important to me in this project is that, accessibility of art is so important to me. And I feel like often as art becomes more valuable, it is made more inaccessible. The price goes up, the spaces it's in become scarier to enter. And so I've always tried to, even as I, seek to, grow in my career, I'm out on streets at markets selling my work. And I do these workshops that invite people in a very playful way. And that's always been important to me, even though I often get feedback from other successful artists that I am cheapening my work somehow, my fine art, by having workshops or selling at a market or having products that sell instead of, striving to have a piece that every single piece sells for $50,000. And I have been very, very stubborn in saying that's not true. We can create beautiful art for multiple different spaces and we can still invite people in. So the fact that Lindsay came into a community space that she learned about from another member of the community and then trusted me with a big project. I mean, she didn't ask any questions. The next day she just said, I came to your earring workshop. I enjoyed it. Will you make a huge piece for Tulane? So I do like, and I think it matches the ethos that Lindsay's bringing to the library too, of accessibility, community, projects, these sorts of things. So that's very, very near and dear to my heart. So when Lindsay came to me, she did give me carte blanche, which is great, but also very daunting. So I was just gonna do a big painting, which she said was fine. But then I started thinking about ways to really push myself. And then the budget also allowed me to think of a way that I could extend myself a lot more. And I extended myself so much, I was like, oh, how can I make no profit with this budget? And then I succeeded. So, but it was really a gift to have all of these resources to really, dive into experimenting in a really exciting way, using mediums that I've used for a while with earrings and smaller things and saying, how can I elevate this, the high-low? Like, let's make this something that makes this space holy, that uses plastic and LED lights. Like, that was a very exciting thing for me. For me, ideas and fabrication are of equal import. This is in pretty stark contrast to what I think the formal art world teaches in its classes, which is that ideas are here and The fabrication of it is down here. I really think it's equal. You know, some projects you're gonna slide one way or the other. But because of that, it was really important for me to have an idea that even if I didn't know how to create it, I did still have my hands in every step of the process. And it's also why I wanted to have Dion here. Dion is in the front row, and she's gonna speak later. Dion and I fabricated the entire thing together, and I really do believe that the hands that make something it's just like making something with your hands for me is still like the most dignified thing that you can do. And so Dion is going to speak about the fabrication of the mobile at the end. We are both artists in Camp Street Studios, which is a group of 12 artists on Camp Street. And Dion is also a graduate of the Tulane Art Department. So you'll hear more from her later, but everything that you see here were made by our two hands. 4 hands. All right, so I'm gonna dive into the slideshow now. That was the cerebral part, and now we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty of how I made the triptych and then the mobile. There are gonna be a few different sections. I'm gonna read them here so that you kind of know what to expect. The first section is inspiration and prototyping, then cutting, how the pieces were created, laying down of the pieces, making the frame, doing the lighting, and then putting all of those different things together. And then I will hand it over to Dion to talk a little bit about the mobile. So, okay, inspiration and testing. Like I said, we got carte blanche with this. So the only 2 bits of information we had were the dimensions of the wall. This is a lovely mock-up that Dion did. We came in and measured. And then we had the logo of the library and kind of the theme of the library, the kaleidoscope. And Lindsay talked a bit about that symbolism and how, you know, art understanding it's a million different pieces coming together. It's kaleidoscopic. So with these 2 things, the wall and the kaleidoscope logo, I started just looking at a lot of examples of mostly ancient and medieval stained glass. One thing that I noticed pretty immediately is that the lines in between, the grout lines, they're not grout, they're metal soldered, but they become just as much a part of the piece as the colored portions. Like it becomes a very linear composition. This is the Blue Mosque. These are arched windows. This is just a window down the street from my house. I just, for weeks, was just everywhere I went. I was trying to also find secular examples of stained glass. And this one I love because you can see here the kind of abstract shapes that are made in that person's house. And then I started turning to a lot of the classic examples like the rosette windows in really famous cathedrals like Notre Dame. And I'm sure you're already like, wait, the rosette form in the cathedral and the kaleidoscope, wait, they kind of go together. So I started sketching. At first I was really tied to this idea of arches because I love arches. They're beautiful, like in a lot of religious contexts. There are arches aplenty, but when I showed it to some people, they said that it was actually too reminiscent of religious spaces, and even though I wanted to play with that, this is and must be a really secular space, so I didn't want to trigger people. And then my friend Sarah is from Iran, and she started pointing me toward a lot of the very geometric, square-framed stained glass pieces in Iran, which were really helpful for me starting to think about it as a more geometric form. This is the first kind of mock-up we did. You can see that I just put the logo in the middle, and I started playing with kind of traditional rosette forms and geometric forms within the square, and then abstracted forms around. And then this is the final design that I cut from. You can see I've placed in all of the correct spacing between the pieces, and those will become lines in and of themselves. The symbolism with the design is that the inner portion, the square, it's much more of a mathematical repetition, and it represents the disciplines with more concrete borders like maths and sciences, and then that seamlessly makes way into the abstract pattern, which represents the disciplines with fewer rules to them, like art and poetry and music, But music is kind of in between. Music is this area, like right on the edge there. But I did want this to be a place where people from all disciplines could come and feel kind of like their brain, whatever satisfies their brain, whether it's orderliness or kind of abstraction. I wanted them to feel some kind of satisfaction when looking at this. So this is a really early prototype. This shows inlaying the pieces. This ultimately was not successful as a method because we had to glue those down, and the glue disrupted the light showing through. So this early prototype was not successful. This was another early prototype. This is when we had created the lines in between each of the pieces and needed a material to, suggest the soldered metal that is used in stained glass. And we thought that we were going to use caulk, which is the black stuff. And I really like that because it's also a plastic material. I liked the idea that we were going to do this ancient form all in plastic. But ultimately, even though actually we were very happy with it, the feedback was that it looked really messy and it didn't look so good. So we started experimenting with grout, which is what you can see in the gray and here. The problem with grout is that it was scratching the surface of the acrylic, and when we wiped it off, there were really visible scratches that were ugly, and we could not do that. So ultimately, so this is the first prototype here. And then ultimately, the solution to that is that I actually, and you'll see this when I talk about cutting the pieces, I mask with masking tape each piece of acrylic. And I was peeling that masking tape off because it's to protect from the burns from the laser. But then Dion said, wait, that'll also protect from the grout. And so we ended up double masking, and doing that ended up being successful. And there's no glue underneath the pieces. It's all a border of glue, which also solved the problem of the glue showing through. So now we're going to get into, so we prototyped, we were happy with it. It was still really scary because, okay, we did it on this small piece, it seems okay, but suddenly we're just committing to do it on a 4x4 piece. And there were still a lot of things that went wrong. So at no point in this process was I relaxed or confident, neither. So this shows that I'm selecting the colors. I often have symbolism and significance associated with colors. I did not have that with this. The only significance is that the interior, it's all variations of the original logo colors. This is the laser studio that I cut in. It's in Kenner. I kind of apprenticed there for about a year, following the guy around, and he now lets me go in when no one else is working there and run these lasers. And it's interesting because some people have asked me, well, that seems like the lowest common denominator. Can't you pass that off to someone else? But this goes back to what I was talking about, ideas and fabrication and craftsmanship being very equal in my mind. I love going there and working the machines and doing that nitty-gritty part of it, and then it makes me feel much more connected to the final product. Oh, that's just an artist's life. That's me carrying around a lot of acrylic. This shows, it was just a vast number of colors for the both the mobile and the stained glass, and they come in sheets of 12 by 19. So I was working with quite a heavy load. This is showing the process I was telling you about before, which I called masking. So every single piece you see there had to be double masked before it went into the machine. I also had to build each file. So once I saw what the colors were going to be, I would collect all of the yellows, put them into a file, all of the greens, put them into a file. And of course, I don't want to waste. It's plastic. So I really was trying to get them as close together to avoid waste as much as possible. So this just shows it's a lot of very boring computer work. And then the fun part is loading the stuff in, getting the machine to start. This shows there are cameras in the machine, so I'm really able to place the design where I want it. And I have a lot of pride over knowing the settings of these machines. It's taken me a very long time, but I still feel every time I go in there and I'm like, I know how to use all of these machines. It makes me feel very good. So yeah, this is just showing quickly in this video and the next what the laser looks like. So that's the laser doing its thing. So this is the machine that cut all of the shapes. This is another quick video just showing the laser at work. So you can see here, this is after days of cutting, and you can see also how close I tried to fit the shapes in. This shows also at the end what those sheets looked like. I also want you to know I still have all of these sheets because the little spaces you see in between here are gonna be used to make earrings. I really try not to waste anything. That camera you saw that allows me to accurately place the files also allows me to use really every bit of scrap material. This is a part I did not think through, which is that I wanted each window to be the same but different. And so when it came to varying the colors between each one, it became very mathematical in a way my brain did not like, which is that if the yellow becomes blue, then the blue has to become green, and then the green has to become, and then you have to make sure that they're not touching a color that's too similar to them. So I also, much to my partner's chagrin, do everything on little pieces of paper that I just like leave around. So it was all very chaotic, but that is how I solved the problem of alternating the colors between each of the windows. So now this is what I think is the most fun and most interesting part of the process. It's the laying down of pieces. This is when Dion and I started doing everything together. We did the prototyping together, and then we came back to do the real thing. Dion created a kind of temporary light box so that we could use a printed template and start laying down the pieces. This was fun. It was like a puzzle and very satisfying. You can see the colors are muted because they're all masked, and we had the template sheet to help us along. This is showing how long it took to lay down the pieces because even sped up, it's boring. But trust me, in reality, it was pretty tedious. Each window took the two of us about 4 hours of gluing. So that's about, like, each window, just the gluing portion is about 8 hours. So this just shows a little bit more. This is after we had finished the center portion, let it dry a little bit, and we were moving outward to the abstracted section. For the third window, I called in a third set of hands because I said I can't do 4 hours again. We got to make it 2.5 hours. So this is 3 of us working on the third window. This is after grout was applied to the window. I was very excited to see this because it really all started coming together when there was the darker line work there. I did panic because I liked so much how it looked when it was gritty like this that I was scared that when we peeled it off, I wasn't gonna like it anymore. Because like I said, all of this felt very like, hope it works. But this turned out to be everyone's favorite part of the process, which was peeling, which was very satisfying. So satisfying that when I brought these into my studio to do peeling, I actually had people visit just to peel. They were like, call me if you have any more peeling. That was really satisfying. It also made us kind of feel like little archaeologists. Those are dental tools, which are great for getting plaque out and peeling plastic stained glass. So this is another video of us peeling, which was very, very, very satisfying and slow. So that's the first piece, all peeled. It was really bright. I was really happy to see that because I did want the brightness of these pieces to balance out some of the grays of this space. And that brings us to the frame. Because once I saw how bright the piece was, I decided that I needed to do the frame in grayscale. And because the stained glass was cut with a machine, I wanted to paint, I wanted there to be something done with the hands for like something imperfect for the frame. So I cut out these stencils using all shapes from the stained glass piece itself. And I did not measure, and I just stuck them on there. And so they're all a little bit wonky, but I like that because when you look at medieval stained glass, it's not perfect. The human hand is very evident in it. And I wanted to kind of counter out the perfection of the stained glass with the human hand in the frame. So this is just showing how I traced using the, again, laser cut stencils. I did the outline. I then painted in each of the shapes. It unfortunately took 2 coats, which I thought I was getting close to the end, and the frame said, not today, not today. So this just shows progress moving along. In the end, everything was coming together. The lights were done. Dion was finished with what she needed to do, and so I actually ended up having to paint the last frames after they were all put together. And by the way, Dion built the frames. They are light boxes essentially and frames. There's about 6 inches behind them to allow the LED strips to go. And she created 2 panels that can be removed to access the lights or replace them as needed. So the lighting was done by Felipe, who he is a professor here at Tulane, but more importantly, he's my friend's husband. So I decided to hire him. And he really is a master with these LED lights. He did the lighting for Sarah's pieces, and so I had seen his light work as it was related to art. And we had fun testing the strips, seeing how far apart they needed to be and how bright, because you didn't want hot spots. Because we wanted this to look like natural light, we didn't want there to be one section where it was clear there was an LED bulb. We really wanted it to look diffused. So we had to space things and make sure that the 6 inches was enough clearance. Having Felipe in there was very much the mad scientist portion of this whole thing. I know that I said that I like to have my hand in everything, but not this. I really don't. I don't want to have anything to do with the technological part or the lighting. So I left this up to the expert. Anyway, this is Dion and Felipe, because Dion made the box and Felipe did the lights, and so this was an exciting part when we were all coming together and bringing all of our expertise into one place. So now we're at the part where we're putting it all together. This was a very late night in the studio. We had worked, all of us, a long time, and it was one of those things where it feels like the final stretch, and then it just keeps stretching, and we needed it to be over. So this is a very exciting portion, like I said, because I was working in a community room, Felipe was at the little desk, Dion was sometimes in her studio, sometimes in my studio, and it really felt like we were a little group of elves all working together.
I wanted to interject because I remember getting text updates at this time, right? Like we've commissioned this huge work of art, and Emma and her team were making remarkable progress, but there's a like, again, I just kept being like, it's gonna turn out great. And it is so exciting to see how much have this sort of be unfolded for everyone as part of the process of what it takes to have art come into being. Anyway, thank you for being so open and for documenting this process. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and also, I promised I was here for all of this. I was just behind the camera. It really looks like I had nothing to do with any of it. I think they're playing now. Okay, I'm gonna go. Yeah, okay, it's fine. Nothing really happens. It's just people moving and communicating. But there really was an immense amount of communication, also because little things were going wrong, and the soldering joints weren't working, and then we had to refigure those, and then for Felipe and Dion to figure out how the frames that she built were gonna work with the lights that he did. It was just a lot of really interesting trial and error. I say interesting, I mean nerve-wracking. And this was the first time we affixed it to the front of the frame and lifted it up, and we were just very excited. And then this is just satisfying to me. And then, so the reason we had to get it very clean is because this is us closing up the back. The lighting has been put in, and we are closing up the back. Now, when these LEDs were all said and done, they should last 7 to 10 years without needing to be replaced, which is amazing. But it also means that closing it up, it's reopenable, but we're kind of closing it up for good. So this was also a very exciting part. This was the first time we tested it with the back all lit up, and we were delirious, which is why we were just going a little nutso. That's me being delirious, but very happy, because like I said, this entire time I could imagine, I knew what I wanted it to look like, I just didn't know if it would look like that. This is my studio when we're finishing up all all three right before installation. And you can see, they look right at home in a big space like the Howard Tilton Library, but in my studio, which itself is pretty big, they really take up every square inch. These are 5 feet by 5 feet pieces, and they kept me company, and I was very happy when they were gone and left me space for other things. And this is what I said before, because of just everyone finishing their pieces at different times, I was ultimately painting the last of the frames after they were all assembled, and this was the day before installation. So this is one last look. Dion's really tired. This is one last look at the frames, at the finished pieces before they got installed in their new home, which I knew they would look different in their new home, but I really liked, they felt like my friends when they were in my studio, and now they feel like, I don't know, someone I used to know. So I was, yeah, exactly. They left the nest. So now we're at the mobile section. Many people say mobile, I say mobile. I'm gonna speak a tiny bit about the concept, and then the rest of the slides, Dion is going to speak about the fabrication. So all of the shapes in the mobile were taken from shapes from the stained glass. I was thinking of them as kind of hieroglyphs? Anyone? Which one? Hieroglyphs, which it's not that different from letters. It's more of a pictorial language, but letters themselves are really nothing more than a combination of lines. They're shapes. And then as we rearrange them, they have new meaning. So many new meanings that we have libraries filled with just 26 letters rearranged into different formations and patterns. And so for me, this is a nod to how language itself works, how the same shapes that I used for the stained glass mobile, if I took them and rearranged them, they became a new thing entirely, and a new sentence, a new, just completely new. And there's also a movement element to the mobile, and that means that as it spins, the shapes are interacting with each other in new ways and almost creating new words, new sentences, and new meanings. And so that was the concept behind the mobile. And then I'm going to pass it over to Dion to talk about how we made it.
Hi, I'm Dion. I just want to say thank you, first of all, to Emma for inviting me to speak as well, and for trusting me with fabricating this work. It was very challenging, but in the best way. My work is very different from this. It's very large and kind of, I don't know, more construction-y, and so this was really cool to kind of get to work on a different side of my fabrication knowledge. So yeah, for the mobile, it was kind of a funny process. Emma handed me some books and was like, "Do you think we can do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." But so a lot of it was about trying to figure out sort of the balance. Balancing a mobile is not as simple as it seems, and so there was a lot of me making little mobiles in my house with clementines and potatoes and weird crap, and then sending that stuff to Emma and being like, I think I got it. I think we can go big from here. And so this is this temporary mobile stand that I built that was very wonky and definitely not structurally sound, but it did what it needed to do. And then I think what was really fun for me was, first of all, like Emma said, she was there every step of the way, and so it wasn't she was just handing me okay, go make that. It was really a collaborative thing that we did. And yeah, this is now we're testing out materials. So we knew that we were gonna go with this quarter-inch steel rod, which is a material that I am very familiar with. It's something that have taught students here how to weld together, and so I was pretty confident that we could use that. But then there was a lot of trial and error in terms of getting the materials to not only do what they needed to do for the mobile, but then also aesthetically align with Emma's vision. And so this was, can you go back to the first one? So here, this was an airline cable, which is a very common material, but when it got so small and to this scale. It just looked kind of funny. And then we had these like balls to try to like mask some of the pieces that were looking like a little wonky. And then Emma was like, wait, I have all of this like jewelry stuff. And it felt like the perfect way to kind of tie Emma's, business with her art. And so, not that the business isn't also art, the business is art. But yeah, and so this was like the when we had finally figured it out. So drilling holes through the metal, which was an insane thing to do. I don't recommend it, but now I got it. And yeah, just basically these little loops are through these tiny little holes inside, in the metal rod. What are they called?
The carabiners?
No, the other ones. The keychain.
Jump rings? Oh, keychains.
Keychains, whatever. Yeah, so Emma had all of these cool little loop things that she uses to make her earrings, the jump rings. And so we started using those as well to join the pieces. And yeah, some of these pieces are actually you can find them again in the stained glass windows, which is really cool, and on Lindsay's earrings. Oh yeah. So one of the things that I learned in my research about mobile making was that you actually have to start at the very bottom and then balance the mobile up. So the first piece we made was that first one that Emma showed you that was the smaller thing, the smaller element that goes at the bottom of the mobile. And so you have to balance that and then attach it to the next layer and then balance the next layer, sort of as a result of what you've made. And so it was a very sort of tedious process of okay, balance this perfectly and then take it down and then put the next thing up and then take, make sure it balances and then take that down and then make the next one. I'm getting so distracted by that. It was so fun. Yeah, that is a very satisfied me at the end of having made this. Yeah, was there something else that specifically?
No, you did a great job. After we solved all the initial problems, I would say that we just had a lot of fun. And it was cool because we worked out a lot of these kinks, and now I made a second mobile with motifs of Spanish moss that was in my most recent exhibit, and we have plans to keep on going with mobile. So it also was a really cool opportunity because it lit something within us. And I will say the second one was so much easier than the first one. I mean, the first of anything feels like you're reinventing the wheel. But we just ultimately had a lot of fun. And actually, this was my full design. If you remember the first image I showed, this was my full design originally. But after we finished it, and it was to the dimensions we had estimated when we measured the stairwell, about 5 feet by 5 feet, we ended up adding another big arm that goes the other way. And y'all can see the finished mobile downstairs in the stairwell. And that's the end of the talk. Thank you guys so much. Here at the stage here. There is a table that has some of the pieces that we used both for the mobile and for the stained glass. Touch, fun tactile experience. I also do want to show you these little orange pieces that you see on the tray are the smallest pieces in the stained glass. So I do want y'all to just look and be impressed with how small we got. It's really, we really got in there. And so you can take a look at all of those pieces. And then also I just want to open the floor to questions if anyone has any questions. Daniela.
This is such a niche specific thing, but I'm curious if you could talk about the decisions between in the central window, all of the plastic is solid, and in the exterior, it's got this more mottled texture. Will you talk about why you chose to do it that way?
Yeah, there is actually a reason. And when I was talking about the colors and I said there was no symbolism to the colors, that's true, but there was a symbolism to the solid versus the patterning. And it's the exact thing that I said about the pattern itself, which is the more defined versus the more nebulous. So for me, the maths and sciences have steadfast rules and they're more solid to understand, and then the arts are fluid, painterly, etc.
Did you feel yourself sort of functioning as an engineer, right? Like in this too, where you were like, because like again, when you were talking about it, and again, the metaphor is endlessly appealing to me. So like, and it speaks a lot to what libraries do, right? But you built a structure to express it, right? That was also sort of technical. What was that like? That sort of the very practical impacting with the vision.
I would call that collaborative, because actually Dion built it, and I said, please don't include me in the building of it. No, I mean, I do like to know what's happening. Like I can be very hands-on, probably in an annoying way, where I like want to see and understand what's going on and touch it. But I also know when to leave an expert to do their thing and to build it, and I'll give feedback when asked, but Dion's the engineer. Do you feel like an engineer?
I mean, I studied architecture before switching over to fine art, so I think that like those skills definitely bleed into a lot of the fabrication stuff that I do, for sure.
Yeah, and like Dion did all of these initial renderings of the stairwell so that we could even understand how it would look in the space, things that were very scientific. Is that science or is that architectural? Okay, whatever. That's stuff that happens in the middle of the stained glass, and I'm out here, so I didn't really feel like an engineer, but I felt like I was collaborating with engineers.
I love that.
All right. Oh.
So where do you think this goes? Are you continue working on this series, or?
So after figuring this out, which kind of broke my brain, and actually I will say, when I started trying to figure out how to make the stained glass, I thought for sure I could Google it and someone had done it and I would be able to do it. And it turns out there was nothing online. So miscalculation on my part. So I did have to kind of figure out this technique, which now, while being very tedious, is not very difficult, if that makes sense. Like it takes time, but it's not very technically difficult. And so I already made the first piece, which is reimagining one of my paintings, which is my primary art form, into stained glass, and put it in a show that I have now. So I'm already like creating or using this stained glass method in other ways. Yeah. All right, thank you all so much for coming. Enjoy the food.
Hey, just one more thing. I wanted to call out and say thank you to the team that made this whole series possible. Rawad, Alan, Rachel, Roblin. We could not have done this. It would not have been possible without you. Thank you for seeing this thing through. And we're so excited for the next things to come. Thank you to our talented artists and engineers, Brain Trust. We are so lucky to have your work in the building. And thank you for giving us the gift of your process too.
Thank you, Lindsay.